So hi, everybody, and welcome to the next in our series of Let Me Introduce You. This is a continuing series from the Memoir Project, and I can see people are still jumping on. So I'm going to blah, 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 blah for a few minutes. Let our guest, our very special guest today, Lucinda Halpern, get a glass of water and hang out in her chair, get the slides to stop jumping around, the usual. But it's really a pleasure to be back here talking to a great expert in her area of expertise. And we're going to bring you along on this topic of how to find your big idea and pitch to agents. We're only going to be together for an hour today, so get in your seats and get settled. I can see people joining like crazy, but we got to start because I have another class this afternoon, as does Lucinda. So we're going to jump in and get going. This is going to last an hour. You are going to get a recording of this. It'll be delivered tomorrow, 24 hours after we get off this call, and you can watch it as many times as you like. Apparently, the last one we did not deliver a recording. I have no idea why. Not on this end, but it was on the end of GoToWebinar. But you will definitely get a recording of this because I can see that it's recording. So I think that's going to be all the time we give all the latecomers to hang in, and we're going to get going. As of today, this series is sponsored by the Cordy podcast, and it's something I've been just loving doing. We're 80 episodes in. I have created this podcast for you. It's by, for, and about writers. If you're not listening, you're not keeping up. So go get the Cordy podcast. It is now available on every single platform, including iHeartRadio. And it is now the sponsor of this series, which is really exciting for me. So it's QWERTY, just like your keyboard, and you want to be listening in. So let's just jump in today and get going. I'm hoping that everybody can hear us. It would be helpful to me if you could find your chat box. I'm sorry, your questions box, not your chat box. Just find your questions box, and you're not going to see either Lucinda or me. We're totally zoomed out at this point. I would have to get up and find my lipstick at this point. So you're going to see us, just see the screen and hear us. Jamie says the audio is good. Fabulous. Just somebody put in the questions box if you can see the screen. That would be helpful. But I'm going to keep going. Great, Martha. Thank you so much. That's perfect. And so would you just hang on to your questions till we get to the end? It's just me in the studio today, no producer, and we have over 400 people registered. So I'm going to be doing my very best to pull out those questions. But let me just tell you who we are. I am Marion Roach-Smith from the Memoir Project. This is the fourth in our series. And we're really, really, really excited today to bring to you Lucinda Halpern, who has over 15 years of experience in corporate and agency publishing. She serves both sides of the literary and business worlds. And she began her publishing career in the publicity division of HarperCollins. She assisted in the book campaigns of such fabulously successful books as Freakonomics, and she has also acted as a marketing consultant to Gretchen Rubin. Today, she represents authors writing in the categories of business, health, lifestyle, popular science, narrative nonfiction, memoir, and upmarket fiction. And we're going to hear all about what all those categories are. Lucinda has an agency, and I want you to know all about it because she has a very different agency than you may perceive agencies to be. She teaches her writers at all stages to improve their query packages and find their big idea. So we're going to be really, really excited today to welcome Lucinda. I wish she could hear the applause that I know is going on. Let me tell you why I chose Lucinda, because this is what it says on her website. Books change lives. We represent the people behind them. I loved that. And she and I had a long talk. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Lucinda Halpern. Hi, Lucinda.
Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm blushing.
That's great. I'm delighted that you're blushing. So let me just, I looked at all the books that you have advertised on your site. I picked these two just because they're wonderful and we know them, and one's a New York Times bestseller, and they're both a New York Times bestseller, sorry. And there's a lot of experience here in what you do. So what my audience is writers, and they so obviously want to talk to you. So I thought what we'd do first is just give a basic understanding of what it is you do at your agency. And then of course we're going to take questions, and that's going to be the wild west here with 400 people on the line, but we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So it'll be great. So here's two books that are on your list. Why don't you just give us a sense of how these represent or how these sit in with the books that you've represented?
Sure. What are the two books, Marion?
Oh, I'm sorry. If you can't see that your own screen, we've got Fifth Avenue 5 a.m. and we've got the Nanny Diaries up on the screen.
Okay,
So if
got
you
it.
turn your visual on, you might be able to see them, but that's fine. Don't worry. I'll cue you into what's on the screen then.
Okay, sorry about that. That's a pop quiz, and I appreciate the question. So it's actually an interesting window into the diverse ways that our agency in particular works, which is unconventional and not like other agencies. So Sam Lawson, who is the New York Times bestselling author of Fifth Avenue 5 a.m. and other books like Falsey, which became a mini series, and The Big Goodbye is his latest about the sort of the birth and the fan craze around Chinatown, the movie. He's a film expert, and we actually represent him for speaking. So we did not develop his books. That's actually the great work of my husband, who is also a literary agent in his own right, a traditional one. And we do Sammy's speaking events, for which he's a sought after speaker.
Great.
The Nanny Diaries, a title that is, and now I can see your screen, awesome.
Great.
The Nanny Diaries, of course, a beloved and well-known, but at this point far older title. I'm sure we'll get into books that may be published today versus books that were published 20 years ago, is by Nicola Kraus, and she is one of our most industrious and beloved sort of do all things writers, and her career is now really in ghostwriting, and in being a novelist and writing graphic novels and writing for film. So Nicola's like my right hand. We talk every day, and she's fantastic.
Great. That's wonderful. So for those of you who couldn't see the screen before, sorry about that. We had a little bit of technical stuff. So here's a picture of Lucinda. And so you can see who we're talking to. And there were slides going forward, but apparently they just weren't projecting. It's just one of those days, and you just gotta keep going no matter what happens. Yeah, so everybody who's saying you can't see anything, you can, in fact, good. I'm delighted. Sorry, glitches, and that's what we're used to. So one of the things that I love about reading up on your agency, Lucinda, is that you've got specialization. The different people who represent writers have different things that they want to represent. So I pulled a couple of the bios of the people with whom you work. This explains what you do. And I also pulled the one from Jackie Ashton. So we'll just if you could, maybe you can just break down the whole idea of different specializations within an agency. A lot of people don't get that certain agents read only certain material. So just walk us through that a little bit, if you would, please.
Sure. I mean, I often tell writers that if you're a book for everyone, you're a book for no one. And I think it's a bit the same with agencies and with editors, right? At a point, you need to specialize, and you need to become the specialist or the expert in your area. And that doesn't mean that we can't keep very diverse lists in sort of what we look for, our various tastes, and what we read at bed, at night. But we do develop relationships with editors in particular categories based on the success we've had of books in those categories. So when you're starting out as an agent, for anyone interested in that general career, your goal is to build your list and your pipeline. You take on anything and everything that has potential, and you don't really have the luxury of, passing on a lot of projects that don't fit your particular niche. For me in particular, I love a couple things, and I know we're talking largely to memoirs today, and I'm passionate about memoir, and I can, talk more about the kinds of memoir I'm looking for. But memoir, like the fiction I represent, like the business books I represent, like the narrative nonfiction I represent, tends to circulate around what I call a big idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so big idea books are the most, that is the umbrella term for what I'm looking for. Now, fiction writers and memoirists might say, what do you mean by a big idea book? I'm not writing a science book, I'm not a PhD. And that doesn't mean that your book is devoid of a big idea. What a big idea means to me is something that's timely, that is popular, that's widely accessible, that has commercial appeal. And usually, Marian, maybe you and I have talked about this, there's something counterintuitive to it. Because in every category, there's a lot of books existing in that category. If
Mm-hmm.
you're a children's book author, there are a lot of classics that you're competing with. If you're a memoirist, you're competing with all the big names out there. So how do you sort of define your perch? This to me is the big idea, and the big idea relies in most part for being surprising. And that's really fiction or nonfiction alike, telling us something about a subject we love that we didn't already know. That's a very tricky thing for an audience of skeptics, of agents and publishers, and then of course readers. So I guess that was a big way to start with what I'm looking for. But you know, like many agents, we're looking for really great writers.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for what we call a platform or a built-in audience, which can be defined in various ways we can maybe get into today. It isn't all about huge social media numbers. And we're looking for that big idea. I will say that agents, along with those at Lucinda Literary, are now increasingly focused on either the more narrative books, which means it's gripping, it's engrossing, we're turning pages, whether it's a memoir or it's fiction. And why is that? Because narrative books lend to podcast, they lend to film, and those are the ancillary streams that we're seeing for writers to really make a living in an age where book buyers and book readers are diminishing.
That's great.
So that's one. And tell me if I'm going too fast. I'm a New Yorker and I do that by nature. But that's what we love in narrative. And then I would say for those of you in the room who are writing what we call a self-help memoir blend, that is still very much in vogue, and it's definitely a passion of ours and a specialty of ours at Lucinda Literary. It's, you know, it's your story with lessons for readers is very simply how we see it. And, you know, I came into publishing like so many others. I'm a reader of literary fiction, never would have looked twice at a business book or a self-help book. That's all changed for me because I see what the market wants. I see what editors want. And, you know, even in my own just maturation as a person, I think, you know, I really could learn some self-help. so
Yeah.
those are the books I love.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that with memoir, I teach memoir so that it always has an argument. It is not a piece of autobiography, and it illuminates for us something universal as illustrated by your deeply personal tale. And in that, we are going to lean in. If it's about how dogs do things for people that people cannot do for themselves, as illustrated by the tale of your 12 dogs, as opposed to being about your 12 dogs, you have a more universal appeal, which means you can sell it, right? You can get out there. People are going to lean into it a bit more. And I think that's really, really an important thing for people to understand, that at your agency, there isn't just one agent, not just you, that your different people specialize within their areas of expertise and interest, so that Jackie does something a bit different. And we're going to give the website contact at the end so that people can read up around your site, which I think is really important, and see to whom they should be making this contact. Because here's the deal, people. This is a very different agency than you might perceive agencies to be. This is an agency that provides skill sets. This is an agency that does classes. This is an agency that and we're going to show you that in a minute, how much they're willing to teach you along the way to your own success. And so you have to understand that every agent is different. And not every agent is interested in teaching you firsthand. Some agents don't want to get involved with rewriting your proposal, rewriting your letter. Some do. So I think it's a really important thing to understand. You're hearing how warm and inviting Lucinda is. And that's one of the reasons, again, along with that slide that didn't show before, that I liked so much, that says on her website, books change lives. We represent the people behind them. I just love that. And so this is the philosophy here that we've got. with this agency. So let's talk a little bit about those courses. We're going to do 3 different slides on the courses or the help that's available for writers. You've got some live courses, you've got some on-demand courses, and then we're going to tease out one in particular and talk about that. But why don't you talk about the variety? You don't have to walk through all of them, but why don't you just talk about the variety and why it is you do this? I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that you are so invested in their success before you even get the book.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. You just said all of that so beautifully. You know, Marion, that I'm here because you're a role model for me, but I'll do my best to keep up. So, you know, what we realized when I founded this agency, which is now over 11 years, right? We're coming up on our 12th year. It was all about not only being more innovative in an incredibly antiquated industry, and I would add to that an opaque industry with a lot of mystique around it that I thought was unnecessary, with a lot of barriers to entry for new writers that I thought was unnecessary, and with virtually no education around it. So it's always been a passion for me to reach as many writers as I can with a story to tell and a voice to tell it. And just as you saw on the title slide, you know, we represent the artists behind them. Books for me are a people first business, right? Not just in the sellers, not just in the buyers, in the publishers, but I fall in love with artists, right? Like that's who I'm falling in love with. That's who I want to work with. So I truly believe that there is like broader impact that industry thought leaders and professionals can make in the sphere of writing. And I, again, don't see agents taking that time. And many of them have these really complicated or old looking websites and you can't really figure out where you fit in. So these courses were just to navigate authors, aspiring authors through, you know, various terrain. I would say one of the more popular live courses or on-demand courses we have is really around marketing, because so many writers, first-time writers, and especially memoirists, are turned down because they don't have the credentials or the audience or what we call the platform to really impress the biggest publishers. And so many writers get the rejection note and they're like, great, I don't have the platform, now what do I do? Right. So we come in with courses and sort of strategies we've learned. You know, again, I started out in a marketing publicity background, so I've been pitching the media for 10 years. I sort of know what they're interested in. And online marketing has become a personal passion, something I've really learned from the best of my, you know, big selling authors and what they do. So that's the why of how we developed that. I would say that the real goal is that you come to us and you take a course, and then maybe you take a consult, you know, you take all of these services that we offer, or maybe you need just one, and you are coached into becoming the best, not the best writer, because Marion, that's where you come in and others like you, you know, we're not talking about the technical trade of writing. We're talking about pitching and presenting and hooking someone on your idea. That's what all of our courses are around. So you come to us and you just have no idea how to really effectively present yourself. And either that's because you've self-published and you don't know how to break in, or you published 20 years ago and now the market's changed, or you're just an aspiring writer with a great story to tell. And that's where we're educating you. And then we've seen a number of our students actually get signed by agents at our own firm and agents from other firms and have now gone on to get book deals. That to me is the greatest testament to success and why I'm in this business. So there you go.
That's lovely. And the thing that everybody needs to keep in mind is, let's talk about the strange, odd requirement to be a writer today. We're home alone. We work, I don't know. I only know one writer who gets dressed to go to work. The great and famous Gay Talese gets dressed in an amazing suit every morning, walks from the 3rd floor of his townhouse down into his basement office in his handmade shirts. The rest of us, you know, I got to tell you, what I have on right now, I wouldn't even wear to the gym. And so we're home alone for some number of months, years, whatever, decades, writing something, and then we're expected to be public ready, right? We're expected to be ready to, I mean, in the best of worlds, and it happened to me, I've been on the Today Show 4 times. I've been on every talk show in America. I was expected from a very young age to be talk show ready. Now I'm expected to be media savvy on all platforms, right? And even 4 books in, the question still becomes, how big is your platform? What can you do? What can you bring us? So it's a little counterintuitive for those of us spend so much time alone in our sweatpants to then suddenly be representing ourselves in the world. And I love the fact that you do this in these courses. You get your writers ready. And you have these on-demand courses as well. And we're going to take on the top one called Get Signed. But I just want everybody to get a sense of what's available at this agency and at some other agencies, absolutely. But I haven't found them to be quite as inclusive as you teach, Lucinda. I was very impressed that you have a very different business model than most agents, and I've met an awful lot of literary agents in my life that explain contracts 101. I've gone to the Authors Guild evenings on how to navigate a contract. But a book proposal boot camp is my new favorite phrase. That is a whole other beast, a book proposal.
Sure.
A book proposal is even more difficult to write than a book because you've got to get small. And so here are some of the courses that she offers, that the agency offers on demand. But let's take on Get Signed, right? Isn't this the one that's sort of the one that we agreed that might be best for you to talk about? And I'm going to put the link to this directly into the chat for those of you who want to take a closer look. But first, Lucinda, why don't you walk us through that, and I'll hold on to the link so nobody leaves our webinar to go there.
Sure. Thank you so much for all of that. This is the course that I feel is our signature, and it's the baby course we sort of started with. So I want people to know that it's a recorded Zoom of writers in the room, and they're asking questions, and I'm giving them feedback in real time, along with all of these presentations, takeaways, videos, sort of all sorts of resources that I think are pretty unique that you won't find elsewhere while you're Googling around. But the reason I think this is a good sort of transition from the work that your writers are doing with you is it's again around, okay, I've got the idea, I've got the story, whatever stage you are beginning to query agents and go for your book deal, you still need to know how to present yourself. So there are 4 modules there, and they each include an expert, like a true expert, a best-selling author, a ghostwriter, the head of a big ghostwriting studio, an expert marketer and publicist who's been in the business forever. And there's actually one more I must be forgetting that will come back to me. But the idea is that these experts are presenting alongside me in their particular specialty. And we're going through even sort of market trends today. Like if you want a 6 to 7 figure book deal, or you're just even curious as to why some authors get that and some don't, we're sort of taking the real data from the marketplace and showing you, well, this is what an author had to obtain that sort of book deal. And
Right.
then, of course, like the most common questions I get, what are the common query letter mistakes I'm making?
Mm-hmm.
I can sort of give some counterintuitive insights right away, but like, how do I even follow up with an agent? Can I follow up with an agent? Or I'm writing multiple things, can I include all of these things in a query letter? And then there's, of course, this perennial challenge for writers around marketing and really highlighting their strengths, not leading with their weaknesses, which
Right.
we just see all too often, these like passive query letters that die on the vine because they're just not exciting enough, Marian, to be perfectly blunt with you.
Yep.
And there are ways to make your story sound exciting and get into a conversation with an agent, which is really the primary purpose a query letter serves. By the way, and then I'll stop my little rant here. The idea is not for these just to carry you through to signing an agent. And the return on that investment should be pretty huge if you get, even a traditional deal starting at $5,000 makes this look like a pretty inexpensive offer. But it's supposed to take you through the process of when you have to package your book, when you have to market your book, all of the things you might actually be learning now that will help you 5 years out from now. And that's really, the end goal of the program.
That's great. Perfect. I so appreciate that. And you give a lot of guidance. I just love the idea that we've got the 6 things every book proposal needs, which is a product that you put out. And you seem to answer the questions. There are so many questions. There are myriad questions that every writer has, no matter where they are in the stage. Even someone like me who's already published 4 books, I have very different questions than I had of my first editor. When when I published my first book, we didn't have online platforms. We didn't have the ability to do this. There were hundreds, there were actually 1,400 more newspapers in the country only 10 years ago. And all of them had book review pages. All of them had people that covered the industry. It's hard to find that now.
Mm.
Very, very few places have that kind of outlet. That doesn't mean you can't get publicity. You can, but you've got to bring a lot of it on your own. So understanding what part of that goes into the proposal is essential. So I'm just so pleased that you give this kind of guidance. Do you want to say anything about this product, the six things
Sure.
every
I mean, this is
proposal
a
needs?
freebie, right? You get this when you register for our newsletter. It's not a book. It's just a
Mhm.
little guide. I think it's about 2 to 3 pages, and it's just some things to consider as you're creating your book proposal. Again, just like a fundamental here, Marion, because so many in the room, if not all, are memoir writers.
Mhm.
One of the common questions I've asked is, do I need a book proposal if I've written a full memoir? And
Right.
agencies will have different guidelines, and I think it's fantastic if you've written the whole thing. I mean, I think you'll need to write the whole thing, so you're certainly saving the work for later. But agencies like ours actually prefer to see a book proposal before we're requesting your full manuscript.
Mhm.
And the good news is, if you've written that memoir, you have this like rich sample material to pull from, and that's the half of the proposal. But then you'll need some other elements like your overview and your bio and your marketing plan. And it's basically a marketing document that you're presenting to an agent to elicit their interest in requesting more.
Mhm.
So that's just something I think is important to say, that our agency and many others will not just request your full memoir, unless you've written a pitch letter that absolutely has my jaw on the floor.
Mhm.
Then I'll request the full memoir if you don't have a book proposal. But short of that, I'm going to want to see this as a first step.
Great. Wonderful. And that's going to be one of the most asked questions. So let's talk ideas for a few minutes and how to find theirs. You talked a little bit earlier about the big ideas, about the ideas that you were looking for when we talked about the different agents at the agency that you run. But in terms of stimulating this conversation, because we're going to go to questions in just a minute and let people ask specifically, and I suspect they're going to pitch you specifically. So we'll see how that goes. But what exactly do you just spend another minute, if you would, on the kinds of ideas, as you said, that make your jaw drop to the floor?
Hmm. Well, Marion, you and I discussed this a little bit as well. I think there's a real trend in the industry that is now supporting and amplifying stories that haven't been told before. And maybe they have a racial element to them, or I'm thinking of a book we represent that's coming out this summer called Roll Red Roll, which is about rape culture. So at the
Hmm.
time at which it was sold, it was sort of heels of Me Too. It was a much older news story, but wow, now 2 years later when it's coming out, does it really sort of have its audience? So
Yes.
in thinking about your big idea, it cannot be the memoir that you've written for 5 years that you now put on a shelf and you take out to agents. You have to be familiar with the general market, not in the sense of the business person like an agent that you hire, but what are the memoirs of the day that are in your category and are selling and are performing and that people are interested in. And this we call comps, comparative titles. It's doing that comparative research to see what's selling, and then to defining how yours is a bit different, right? How your perch is a bit unique. Beyond that comps research, or beyond what we think of as traditional book comps, lots of writers are surprised to learn that agents and editors are thinking about comps from a very holistic standpoint, where we're not just looking at books, we're looking at the Netflix series that's doing so extraordinarily well, or the podcast that's taken off, or the magazine article that's gone viral, all as data points for what is popular and what there's a cultural appetite for.
Yep.
So authors are sort of like, wow, I never knew I could think about it this way, because of course we're all reading in these other mediums, right?
Hmm.
And that's sort of the way you go about familiarizing yourself with what's popular and what's novel about yours. And that for me is the equation of, a book that makes my jaw drop.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And it really leads into my next slide, which is just a reality check of what's
Mm,
going on in the world. You know, the two questions the editorial page editor or the op-ed page editor at the New York Times asks every time she gets or he gets a proposal from someone is why this writer, why now?
mm,
What's the authority of this writer? Doesn't mean you have to be a former Joint Chief of Staff, but it means that you've got to have kept your eyes open at the world. So if you're a fly fisher and you've got these observations about the how streams got really dirty and the rollbacks of the of the environmental quality control issues that were rolled back in the last presidential administration, you've got an authority, you've got a point of view. And why now? Well, people are fly fishing right now. We're
mhm,
probably not going to read that piece in January anywhere in the country, right? So why this writer? Why now? The reality check of what's going on in the world. What are we going to be thinking about when that book comes out? What are we thinking about right now? Nobody has a real sense on the a finger on the pulse of when we're going to really emerge from COVID. But you know, just how many COVID memoirs are we going to want to read, as opposed to how many memoirs are we going to want to read that take on the idea of how do we emerge from a kind of emotional slumber or a fear-based experience? You know, you've got to start to reposition yourself in your thinking about what the book really takes on. And that's not to say you should do some bumper chasing and go and try to write a book because it's going to sell. That's going to result in a hollow voice, right? You've got to write what you're interested in, what you believe in, but you've got to keep your eye up on the reality of when that book is going to hit the market, I think is. And so Lucinda, any other light to shed on that sort of timing thinking without just being a bumper chaser?
mm. I love your language. I mean, when you're talking about coming out of emotional slumbering, I think of a memoir, I would call it a memoir called Wintering, that
Hmm.
did, extraordinarily well. And why was that? The writing is absolutely gorgeous and the theme is totally timely. So what we hear from editors is, no, not another pandemic, story, just as you said. I don't even want to see COVID mentioned in your overview. We get a lot of memoir proposals about the Great Resignation. My editor friends will say, great, but what's after the Great Resignation?
Right.
So how is that theme, and Marion, I know you talk about this too, universal and perennial? How can it be applied? Publishers and agents are thinking like futurists. We're thinking 2 to 5 years out from when we're actually acquiring your book. So it's really tough to anticipate those trends.
Hmm.
Um, you want to be on the elevator up. You want to see that there's some sort of groundswell around an idea, but that it has so much potential to go further. And a specific example of this is minimalism. So I'm thinking of a Wall Street Journal bestseller we represent called A Year of Less, which is a memoir, and it was about a young woman's 2-month shopping ban, and the story got so much attention in different magazines. And she had a blog. She had a pretty vibrant, small, but very engaged community of people who fangirled her and loved her. And we got to ride the wave of minimalism, van
Hmm.
life minimalism. Well, guess what? At Marie Kondo, at the time we sold that book, I'm not even sure Marie Kondo's book had come out. So 5 years later, this book is still selling like gangbusters because that tiny groundswell of an idea is now burgeoning and everywhere.
Yeah, that's a
So
great example.
yeah, so the timing is important.
Mhm. I remember that book so well. That it had magazine pieces, there were references to it. It became a cultural touchstone.
Mm,
And what she did was fairly simple. She dialed down what she ate, touched, bought, lived with, and yet she wrote so beautifully and did. I remember the blog, right? She's got a small but very, very devoted following, and the book did marvelously. She felt something coming, right?
yeah.
She anticipated something. And while not all books have to have precise prescience, they require some degree of it. So I think that's the reality check. I always say to people, it's not that you can't write another alcoholism recovery memoir. We never get tired of them, but you have to remember we want your story as it pertains to this universal about the whole experience of recovery. And we never get tired of books that argue that dogs do things for people that people cannot do for themselves. But we don't want you to just do a cute dog book. We want there to be some integrity in the storytelling and some great writing.
Mm,
So that is absolutely true. So we're going to just show you this, Lucinda Literary, and I'm going to also, which is how you contact Lucinda, and I'm going to put now I've got in the chat the link for the Get Signed piece, the Get Signed course, and she's provided a special code with a discount for you listening today to that, which I love. Thank you, Lucinda. That's very, very generous. And I thought we'd go to questions, which I expect are going to just blow up.
Bring it. This is my favorite part.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm my very own producer here. Oh my God, there's 5,000 questions in the chat. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do here is toss up questions to Lucinda that I'm combining a couple of questions at a time, because obviously we're not just going to, we're not going to repeat them. So let's see. We've got, so how about, oh, look, people have submitted to you already. That's hilarious. That's wonderful. So Portia asks, how developed does a memoir need to be for you to be interested in representing the author?
Very easy. I don't expect your memoir to be fully written, but you can't come to me with, this happened the other day. I have 30% of my memoir written. It is attached. Please read it. Obviously, the pitch was not as bare bones as that, but it's like, I didn't request the manuscript. If you have the manuscript and that is your submission, it better darn well be complete. So if you're still in progress, the best thing you can do is do a book proposal, because that will allow you to show the material that you've already done, select sample chapters and a vision for how you're going to expand. So that's what I'd recommend to you.
That's great. So a lot of different agents work differently. And I was just having this conversation with a writer yesterday on the phone, and Ruth asks the question that I think that writer was asking me yesterday. Is it best to approach an agent when you are completely done writing or mostly done, so that person can help shape it on the agency's tastes?
Yeah. So again, if you're in nonfiction, then the book proposal is the way to go in my view, in our agency's perspective, because that does allow for that shaping potential. And I guess one of the things I missed in sort of talking about the founding of my company was a value around being really editorially hands-on. I mean, I'm a ruthless editor, and that's my 101, what I love, and every agent at my firm is the same way. So we want our hands on every page, but we sort of can't do that without a book proposal, because that allows us really to shape the idea with you. And what we find, I mean, I can maybe think of one or two cases where an author has actually presented us the big idea. Mostly, we're taking your pitch and we see the glimpse of an idea and we're lending our market feedback. And in my case, I'm even talking to editors about things as soon as I sign them on, getting their feedback and then guiding an author to do it, to implement. So, I think that you want to engage an editor when you have the idea fully baked, your marketing, your bio, and all of it, some sample material to show, but you don't want to say, here it is, go sell it, because that works if you're Gillian Flynn and not, Glennon Doyle, not many others in today's market.
Right. Can you please repeat the name of the book on minimalism? Joy asks.
Oh, sure. It's called A Year of Less.
A Year of Less. Fabulous. Thank you. So we're at lots of questions about what exactly goes into a prospectus or a book proposal. I suggest you go sign up for Lucinda's newsletter, no cost to you, and you'll get that free product that we had on the screen a couple of moments ago for all of you. I'm just going to answer that question right now. Try to have a look at that. I think that's going to answer it best. If people ask about the age of comps, the word she used earlier was comps, which is comparables, right? You're going to say this book is you're going to, in your mind, that this book, these other books sold. So how far back should a writer go? Do you want to reference Running with Scissors, which is a book that's now, I can't even remember how many years old, or Wild, or Eat, Pray, Love, or do you really want to mention and or study up on books that are literally on the shelf that came out recently?
Yeah, I have a pretty specific answer to this, and it's based on conversations with editors. And it's within the last 2 years. It's 50 plus reviews. That's my own metric, but it sort of demonstrates that there's, some sort of audience around the book and some sort of reception. And then I try to aim for less than a 10,000 ranking on out of Amazon. So we're not into the millions and millions of a book. And usually that, has a better chance of happening if the book isn't 50 years old. So that's the way that editors are looking at comps as well when they're trying to sell the books internally. They're literally Googling keywords if they're not already familiar with the comps, which is the best case scenario. They're Googling keywords to make the case to their higher ups that there is a market for this and look how many reviews and look how many sales.
Right.
With that said, there's nothing wrong with saying this is the book that, this is the new version of a book that was published in it hasn't been done in 50 years.
Great.
And now is the time, for a modernization of some kind of that book. That I think can be a really compelling argument for a comp as well.
Wonderful. Great. That's a great answer. So lots of people want to know some examples of ways to build a platform besides just social media following.
Mhm. Goodness, I mean, yes, we do answer all. I mean, unfortunately, it's not like a 5-second answer, right? But I'll try to be as quick as I can, because so many writers, Marion, and you know this, are like social media phobic, and frankly, I'm one of those people. I can't deal with the thing, but I know I have to be out there, right? I know I need to find people that way. So if social media is not for you, what many writers enjoy doing is a newsletter, much like yours or mine. It's being able to send their writing, their musings, their content, their, whatever it is that's inspirational to their audience, once a week, once a month. And that becomes like a private forum. The beauty of email newsletters is you're building your tribe, you're building your pre-book launch audience, so that when the time comes to sell your book, now you've got 500, 10,000, whatever your number is, sort of captive in your inbox, possible consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And so publishers are looking in nonfiction, and we'll talk about categories where this doesn't so much apply, but even if you're a novelist and you have a major email list, the better, the better, the better. They're looking at that metric more than they are social media. They're sort of checking the boxes of, oh, this person's got a following on Instagram and, whatever, but they're not obsessed with that to the level that they get excited about a robust email list. So that's one way to do it, particularly for those writers in the ivory tower who don't want to get out there and be mediagenic. I see media itself, well, 10 years ago used to be a great thing. I felt all of these, articles in the New York Times, what I was on the whatever, NPR 10 years ago. That's kind of it's impressive to the publicity people who are in the room also involved in the acquisition decision, but it is no more a necessity. And in fact, it's not even, it may not even make or break the deal, because the online marketing universe is so much more potent and powerful. We're seeing at selling books. Other things you can do, a speaking schedule. So if you're a memoirist, if you're a novelist, if you are certainly a business or entrepreneurship writer, you can be actively speaking to groups of people. And then you can quantify, I give 30 talks a year to rooms of 100 people. Even better, I receive a speaking fee. Publishers are looking for who's your audience and how do you prove it? The worst thing you can do, and I'll wrap up here because again, there is so much to say on this topic that I can't say in 2 seconds. The worst thing a writer can do is send out a submission and have virtually no online presence, meaning an agent or an editor is going to Google you as soon as they get interested, and there is zilch zero, that to me is like, it's a mark against you. And of course, for fiction writers, this becomes a little less important. Like there are some exceptions there. For nonfiction writers, it's absolutely de rigueur. You've got to be present somewhere.
I think that's a great answer, and I'll give you a chance to catch your breath there. I can tell you that what I get from a lot of writers is, but I'm a huge Russell Banks fan. I'm a huge Louise Erdrich fan. I'm a huge, and those people don't have any, Lori Moore, they don't have any social media presence. You're right, they don't. They're of a generation. They have a very devoted following when they bring out a book. Anna Quinlan's another one. I interviewed Anna on the Cordy podcast a couple of episodes ago. She's 21 books in. She's been on the bestseller list in every category. She's had a #1 New York Times bestseller. Anna doesn't have to do a lot because her audience is always looking for her next book. Plus, Anna is always writing a book, and the expectation is, oh, it must be time for a new Anna Quinlan book. Those are exceptions. You are not in that category. And my advice is always, always to try to write a piece in on a large website or a national newspaper that'll attract the kind of attention where an agent or editor who are constantly scouring the op-ed pages of the New York Times, the large online sites for good new writers, want to then say, oh, look, in the tagline, meaning the bottom of the page, it says Marion Roach is working on a memoir. Best thing you can say. They Google Marion Roach, they get to my website, right? And they say, wow, look, she's actually writing a lot. Oh, wow, I like her writing. Oh, look at the places she's published. But even if you're brand new, as long as we can reach you, that's the very first bare heck minimum step, I think. So Alarwi asks, and I'm probably mangling your name, sorry about that. She asks a question following up on something really wonderful that you said earlier, Lucinda, about the kind of writers that you really like to represent, which are the writers that have been traditionally not included. The New York Times this week, last Sunday, on the cover of the magazine was all about how publishing is diversifying. That piece is about, I don't know, 100 years overdue. Well, actually, the movement of publishing to be more diverse is 100 years overdue. But Elari asks, is Black survival still of interest out there? So why don't you just take that a little more broadly, Lucinda, and just talk about inclusive, diverse outlooks that you like to engage in and what we're really looking for at this point.
I mean, it's never more been a mission of agencies and publishers that I respect to uphold diverse voices, BIPOC voices. So again, like that extends to so many different areas. That could still be women, by the way, right?
Yes.
There was this whole sort of, and sorry if I'm on a tangent here, but there was an interesting movement I was telling my family about they didn't know about called #PublishingPaidMe some time ago.
Yes, I love that one.
I mean, come on. So Black authors, female authors, I mean, all sorts of people coming out and saying, well, I got X for my book deal, let's be transparent, and finding out that, hey, the middle-aged, the white rich man was getting more on his book deal than they were. So these sort of reckonings on social media, Black Lives Matter, it has made it also important. So to address this specific attendee's question, yes, this is still an issue that we are supportive, passionate about wanting to amplify. The same rules about having an existing audience or the writing that sings on the page or a well-organized, coherent outline, those rules still apply. So, it's like, yeah, I mean, I hope that sort of answers on the inclusivity question.
Great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a couple of these. Memoir is, in fact, nonfiction, Lenore, just to give you that. People sometimes ask, is memoir fiction or nonfiction? Memoir is considered nonfiction. A couple of people, Lucinda said, they're trying to put in the discount code and the window isn't taking it. So maybe you can have somebody on your end make sure that these nice people can get signed and get their 10% off with the code Marion.
And we'll extend this after the webinar as well. I probably should have said that, but we will. If they come from you, Marion, we will absolutely help you out.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We've had one of those techno days, and I think it's just that probably. Yes, there will be a replay. Everybody that registered for this will get the recording. Absolutely. So a lot of people are asking about the same basic thing, which is what if you write under a pen name? How in the world do you have a social media presence if you're trying to be anonymous? Lots of memoirists try to keep their identities at least concealed. So, Lucinda, I'm going to let you answer this one.
Yeah, this is a tricky one, huh? This is a tricky one. I mean, I think that when you're submitting something, because it's almost similar to the question, like, will people steal my content, right?
Right.
When you're submitting to an agent or publisher, it's a very intimate and private submission. And I haven't found that people abuse that, which means that what you should do if you plan to write under a pen name, but you have an audience as a person online and your pen name doesn't, you will need to actually submit with your real name. And it should be explicitly clear in your query letter why it is you would choose a pen name, right? It can't be because you've always thought that Peter Pan was a wonderful name that you dreamed about writing it. It's got to be that you're a political, you're worried about backlash. So many people don't actually need to use pen names, and I'd probably recommend they don't because when it comes to media, for instance, you're going to want that real story out there and you're going to be the spokesperson for your book. So I find it's like harder and harder to do, Marian, and not recommend it. But either way, when you submit to agents, use your real name.
Great. When I have this question comes up every day here at the Memoir Project. And what I have people do who want to join classes, create an alternate email. Create that alternate email under the pen name so that when you come and join a webinar like this, we see your alternate name. I've had so many people say they wanted to do that and then they go and register in their other name and we don't know what to do with that. So literally, if you want to use an alternate name, start by being in a class with the alternate name. Start by getting used to that alternate name. But I too believe that no agent, I mean, agents are all about confidentiality. My agent is the absolute soul of discretion and doesn't talk about her other clients and doesn't talk about who they are and all of that. So keep in mind that in your business dealings, you want to have an upfront experience with somebody and, tell them who you are. So let's see.
Marian, I have a couple things to say while you're picking out questions, because one thing that you asked reminded me of a good example to give. Before I say that, I wanted to say for those having technical difficulties, they should try opening with a different browser.
Great.
And you can use the Lucinda Literary NYC at gmail.com for any tech support issue you might be having. And thank you all for buying the course on this webinar. I'm so glad. The example I wanted to bring up when you mentioned writing an op-ed in the Times, Marian, is that placing one article with a notable publication that gets exposure will not only bring you social media followers and fans and more online visibility, it will actually draw the agents and the publishers to you, which is sort of the best case scenario, right? You're not out there blind pitching. So to give an example from my firm and a total passion, love affair for me, one of our authors, Michelle Dowd, wrote a modern love column. When you write a modern love column, as has been the case for 10 years, at least 10 agents will contact you. Her piece was called Love in the Time of Low Expectations, and it's a beautifully written piece. I could tell that she was a natural writer. And in it, there was a line about her upbringing in a cult. Her father, who was a sort of cult leader. And I said, wait a second, like back this train up. Have to contact this person, need to know the story. What agent isn't looking for the next educated by a writer who can actually write? Not that Tara can't, I'm just saying someone of her background who actually has also the profile as a writer. And I contacted her and we were like signed up within the week. And, on the basis of that article, she's gotten podcast interviews and speaking invitations and social media followers. So I can't recommend that strategy more highly for those of you who are just like, social media is not for me.
I have to absolutely agree. I have 3 clients who have published the Modern Love column. All 3 had agents. One of them had a book deal by the end of the week. In the last 3 weeks, 3 of my clients have gotten astonishing book deals. One of them from an essay she wrote that was in a journal that most of you have never heard of, but she chose it well. It's well read. She chose amid her demographic. In other words, she went on Google and she identified herself in a Google search. Let's say you want to write for mothers of small children and you happen to be Jewish. You're going to find Kveller, which is a big site that is for that demographic, right? You're going to publish there. That is a place that other editors and agents are looking at. Obviously, the Modern Love column is an amazing place to publish, but I have clients that are getting agents and editors from publishing in other spaces. 2 of my 4 books came from pieces I wrote elsewhere, small pieces that tested my argument on an audience. Both of them were nonfiction. One of them was a piece of memoir, and one of them was my little book, The Memoir Project, which started as a blog post that went viral. So don't absolutely do not consider not writing for a smaller publication, something smaller than a book, and seeing where you get. It's a wonderful way to test your material on the market.
Mhm.
Um, Cecily asks, is there an appetite for historical memoirs? She says she's writing a third generation memoir, making the connection between my inherited World War II trauma and now being back in the height of war in Europe. So history and memoir. What do you think?
We do receive a lot of queries like this, and
Mhm.
I would say there that you're not necessarily going to have the timeliness aspect, right? Like this is not the subject that people are seeking in the way they are underrepresented stories, marginalized stories. But so if I could counsel you, it would be to try to find some kind of tie-in to why there might, the why this book now question, why there might be a popular appetite for this kind of book. But more than that, does the writing sing on the page? The
Mhm.
biggest issue, as I know you teach, Marion, is that a person's story can feel big to that person and very small to the blind reader who doesn't know that person. So
Mhm.
if it's just reading like a chronology and you're not focused on themes and on argument and on helping us turn pages and meet characters and driving the plot forward, sort of all the rules that apply for fiction, you'll get lost in the shuffle. So I would say, is there an appetite? Yes, if your writing is stellar and if you can make that link in your pitch for the why this book now.
Right. So we've got a war going on in Ukraine. It's
Yep.
stirring up a lot, but you want to make sure that it might not quite be enough, but it's certainly something. And then you
Mhm.
want to talk about what hurdles through your three generations of your family in terms of war experience and how it's been rekindled. But you got to write, as we say in my family, you got to write the hell out of it. And that's our expression. None of us has had it tattooed on anything yet, but we might. You never know. Let's see, a couple of more before we have to let Lucinda go because she's got a busy day. As I did say, there is a replay. It'll be sent to you 24 hours after you get off this call. Very important for you to, you can listen to it again and again. Both Lucinda and I are New Yorkers. We talk way too fast, but that's what happens. Yeah. And here's one that we get a lot I get a lot of, and we'll probably wrap up with this one. A writer who's partnering with a friend on a memoir and basically writing that person's story. I have a large complete post on this on my site called How to Write Someone Else's Story. But here's Joy's question. Do you focus on her social media or my own, or do we create some kind of hybrid social media platform for the two of us together?
Yeah, so interesting. I think so there are two authors of this book, is that the case? Or is there just the one author?
It
It's
sounds like there's a one author doing a friend's book, but
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I mean, certainly in your marketing plan, you could talk about these various ways that you'll get the word out. You can do a lot of like sort of marketing presentation things like our combined social media presence of X. But in terms of what you want to actually establish, I'm all for doing an individual presence
Hmm.
because there may be more books to come. Who knows if you and your partner, what happens there. So I think that, again, the individual authors are the spokespeople for their books. And so you really want your own presence, each of
Great.
you.
Okay, one last question. Lots of people asked if I've self-published on Amazon, can I still go get myself an agent and a book deal for that book or for future books?
And yes, I'm so happy to end on a happy note. I am an agent who loves, I should love self-published authors. I love successfully self-published authors, which means, again, not that you have sales numbers into the 50, 100,000 mark. That's fabulous if you do, but that you have a really great idea, wonderful writing, and that you've proven that there's been response to your books. So I
Yeah.
always say publishing is a long and winding road, and you should try every opportunity to get an agent when you have the right idea. Quick example is we took on a series called Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. It was self-published. The author's a force. She was going around during the pandemic doing Instagram. She was appearing live on Zoom for people's book clubs and promoting on Instagram. I had nothing but to look her up, see this great title, see the reviews on Amazon, and say, I want her. I know publishers for her. Within a week, we had a 4-book deal at HarperCollins. I mean, it was just
4-book
like, right,
deal. That's the tattoo.
that's the tattoo, right? That's the success story that I love to tell, because it's just a perfect, like, of course, you should keep going after your dreams, right?
Yes, that's a
So,
beautiful answer. My little book on how to write memoir started as a self-published experience. And even though I had published really well with 3 of the big 4 publishers prior to that, my sister and I published it as a lark, kind of, during the recession. And then when we sold every copy we had published, then and only then I called my agent and she said, I love this book. Let me take it out to the market. So please do not think because you have self-published you cannot succeed. My book, my little book, The Memoir Project, has now been out for 12 years with Grand Central and sells as many each quarter as it sold the quarter before. So thank you, thank you, thank you for coming along. Here is the contact for Lucinda, lucindaliterary.com. And she's waiting to hear from you. She's got the newsletter, she's got the product, she's obviously got the enthusiasm. So Lucinda,
thank you, Mary.
thank you. That was just perfect. I hope everybody will put a thank you in the chat, please, because I thought that was just as good as it gets. And Lucinda, we're so grateful to you. Thank you for coming along today. And thank you to everybody that came along as well. You'll get a recording. We're just glad to have you here. Lucinda, I'll see you soon, okay?
I'll see you soon, and my pleasure. And so nice to talk to all of you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. We'll see you again next month when we do this again. Be well, write well, and stay in touch. Bye-bye.